Alaska's frozen silence hides stories older than written history. Beneath its endless tundra and within its remote mountain ranges lie puzzles that have baffled experts for generations. This is a land where the past refuses to stay buried, whispering of civilizations that vanished and phenomena that defy logic. By the end of our journey, you will see the far north not as an empty wilderness, but as one of the planet's greatest and most mysterious archives. We will investigate rumors of a lost Arctic city built from stone and examine artifacts carved with faces that seem not of this world. What does it mean when the land itself seems to remember what history has forgotten? Among the most persistent whispers from the north is a tale of a metropolis carved from stone. This is the legend of a lost city, said to lie hidden within the formidable peaks and valleys of the Brooks Range. This sprawling mountain barrier, a sea of rock and ice stretching across northern Alaska, seems an unlikely place for a grand settlement. Yet for over a century, stories have filtered out from trappers, prospectors, and the occasional explorer, speaking of something impossible. They describe not just a few crumbling huts, but vast walls, foundations laid out with geometric precision, and archways standing silent in the eternal wind. The most compelling accounts often trace back to the early 1900s, during the last great gold rushes. Miners pushing into unmapped valleys would return with wild stories. They spoke of finding stone blocks so large and so perfectly fitted that no modern man could have placed them there, structures that bore no resemblance to the sod houses of known indigenous cultures. These men, hardened by the wilderness, were not given to fantasy, yet their consistent descriptions sparked a mystery that endures. What were they seeing? Was it a trick of the light on strange rock formations, the desperate mind seeing order in chaos, or was it a genuine glimpse of a forgotten chapter? Archaeologists, when they have ventured into these remote areas following the rumors, have found nothing conclusive. No widespread, coordinated ruins have been officially documented. This absence of proof, however, only deepens the enigma. It fuels theories that what exists is not a city in the classical sense, but perhaps the monumental remains of a pre-Inuit civilization, a people with building traditions lost to time. Some, looking further back, even connected to the myth of Hyperborea, a legendary ancient land of perpetual sunshine said to exist beyond the north wind. Could these stones be the outpost of a culture so old we have forgotten its name? Visualizing it is a challenge. One must picture not marble columns, but dark, lichen-covered slabs rising from the tundra, low structures designed to shed snow and withstand unimaginable cold, arranged in patterns that align with celestial movements we no longer understand. The true mystery may not be the city's grandeur, but the profound silence that surrounds it, a place built to last, yet seemingly erased from human memory. If it is real, who built it, and what catastrophic event or slow decline caused its people to vanish, leaving only stones and stories in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth? But stone walls are not the only structures that speak of forgotten peoples. Far to the west, on a narrow spit of land jutting into the Chukchi Sea, lies the site of Point Hope. Here, the Earth has preserved a different kind of mystery, one carved not in rock but in ivory. This is the world of the Ipiutak, a culture that flourished for centuries, from roughly 100 to 800 years after the Common Era. They were not primitive survivors. They were a sophisticated Arctic society. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of complex seasonal settlements, elaborate burial practices, and a mastery of survival in an extreme environment that rivals any known to history. They built semi-subterranean houses in long, orderly rows, suggesting a highly organized community. Their toolkits were advanced and efficient, yet, for all their apparent success, the Ipiutak people vanished completely, leaving behind no clear descendants, and a legacy of artifacts that are profoundly unsettling. The true enigma of the Ipiutak is not found in their houses, but in what they held in their hands. They were master carvers, transforming walrus ivory into objects of stunning and bizarre artistry. Their most famous works are small, intricate masks and face carvings, but to call them simply masks feels inadequate. These are portraits of beings that seem not entirely human. They feature elongated, gaunt faces with hollow cheeks. The eyes are often deep, spiraling pits, swirling vortices that seem to pull the viewer inward. Mouths are frequently wide open, as if frozen in a silent scream or an eternal chant. Some faces are split down the middle, one side serene, the other a contorted grimace. Imagine holding one of these pieces, feeling the smooth, cold ivory, and staring into those spiral eyes. What world were they depicting? Were these representations of powerful spirits, shamanic visions from trance states, or portraits of ancestors transformed by a belief system we cannot fathom? The artistry is too deliberate, too consistent across finds, to be dismissed as mere decoration. These carvings feel like a direct window into a spiritual landscape that is utterly alien to our modern understanding. Their disappearance is a parallel mystery. By around 800 years after the Common Era, the Ipiutak sites show no signs of further occupation. There is no evidence of war, no mass graves suggesting plague. It is as if the people simply decided to walk away, or were slowly absorbed by other migrating groups like the ancestors of the modern Inupiat. Some researchers see strong artistic and cultural links to ancient Siberia, suggesting the Ipiutak may have been part of a much larger, now vanished, circumpolar world. But the links are threads, not solid chains of evidence, so we are left with a haunting void. A people capable of profound artistry and community organization simply fades from the archaeological record, leaving behind these silent ivory sentinels. Their spiral eyes hold a question we may never answer. Were they looking inward at the human soul, or outward at something ancient and strange that still watches from the Arctic shadows? The spiral eyes of Ipiutak carvings are not the only artifacts in Alaska that stare back with silent, cryptic purpose. Far to the south, where the Pacific's fury meets a chain of volcanic islands, lies a different kind of enigma, one shaped not by human hands, but perhaps by forces we have yet to understand. Scattered across the windswept, treeless landscapes of islands like Chujanadak and Adak in the Aleutian chain are collections of strange stone spheres. These are not the polished, nearly perfect orbs of Costa Rica, famous in archaeological circles. These Alaskan spheres are rougher, more primal, yet they share that same unnerving sense of intentionality. They range in size from that of a bowling ball to larger than a person, often composed of andesite or other dense volcanic rock. Their surfaces are weathered by centuries of salt spray and relentless gales, but their spherical shape remains stubbornly, improbably intact. The central puzzle is their origin. Many appear almost perfectly round, a geometry that seems at odds with the chaotic, fractured nature of the volcanic landscapes they rest upon. Crucially, most show no discernible tool marks, no chisel strikes or grinding patterns that would clearly signal human craftsmanship. So what are they? One compelling school of thought argues they are entirely natural, a rare but documented geological phenomenon known as concretion. In this process, minerals slowly precipitate around a central nucleus within sedimentary or volcanic rock, forming a hardened ball that over eons can be exposed by erosion. The Aleutians, being a volcanic hotspot, could provide the perfect chemical and environmental conditions for such formations. It is a tidy, scientific explanation. Yet, for those who have stood among them, the explanation often feels incomplete. The spheres are frequently found in groups, sometimes in arrangements or on raised terraces that feel deliberately placed. Their location on islands that have been inhabited by the Unangax people for thousands of years invites deeper questions. Could an ancient culture have recognized these natural oddities and incorporated them into their worldview, moving and arranging them for ceremonial or astronomical purposes? The contrast with the Costa Rican spheres is telling. Those were definitively shaped by human hands, tools, and immense labor, serving as clear markers of social status and territorial power for a known culture. The Aleutian spheres are more ambiguous. They occupy a middle ground between natural wonder and artifact. If they are purely natural, why are they found in such suggestive clusters in a landscape otherwise devoid of smooth shapes? If they were curated or even slightly modified by ancient people, what was their significance? Were they symbols of the sun or the moon, used to mark solstices on the horizon of the vast, empty ocean? Could they have been seen as the eggs of a primordial spirit, or anchors for the soul in a spiritual landscape dominated by sea, sky, and volcano? The lack of clear answers is what seals their mystery. They force us to confront the limits of our categories. In a place as harsh and dynamic as the Aleutians, the line between the work of the earth and the work of humanity blurs. These silent stone orbs, resting where the world literally ends, challenge us to decide: are we looking at a fascinating accident of geology, or the faint, eroded signature of a ritual we can no longer read? The silence held by those ancient stones and ivory faces speaks of a land that does not easily give up its secrets. But what if the very ground of Alaska is not just a keeper of history, but an active participant in its mysteries? This brings us to a modern enigma that may have prehistoric roots, the phenomenon known as the Alaska Triangle. On a map, it forms a shape connecting the northern point of Utqiagvik, formerly Barrow, down to the city of Anchorage and over to the southeastern capital of Juneau. Within this vast and largely uninhabited wilderness, a disproportionate number of people have vanished without a trace in modern times, from small aircraft to solo hikers. The stories are well documented and chilling, yet to view this as solely a contemporary mystery is to miss a deeper, older layer. The land itself, through the voices of its original peoples, has whispered warnings for thousands of years. Indigenous oral histories from across this very region are rich with accounts that feel eerily familiar. They speak of certain valleys, mountain passes, and lakes as being thin places where the barrier between our world and others grows fragile. There are tales of spirit beings, some benevolent, some mischievous or dangerous, that could lead travelers astray. Stories describe sudden, dense fogs that would descend without warning, lifting to reveal that a member of a hunting party was simply gone, with no tracks leading away. More profound are the legends of entire villages that were found deserted, with food still cooking over fires, but not a single soul remaining. These are not ghost stories in the casual sense. They are cultural memories, passed down with the gravity of historical events. The modern disappearances, often attributed to the harsh terrain or unpredictable weather, mirror these ancient narratives with unsettling precision. Could it be that the Alaska Triangle is not a new anomaly, but an ancient one? The theory suggests this geographic zone has always been a place of strange activity. The indigenous understanding frames it not as a triangle of doom, but as a landscape alive with powerful and sometimes capricious forces. Certain areas were traditionally avoided or approached with specific rituals and respect. A hunter would not camp by a particular lake known for pulling people under its still surface. A family would not travel through a specific pass at night, when the little people or other entities were said to be active. These were not superstitions, but a sophisticated survival code born from collective experience over millennia. When we hear of a modern bush plains instruments going haywire before it vanishes from radar, or a seasoned outdoorsman disappearing from a well-marked trail, we are likely witnessing the latest chapter in a very old story. The tools have changed, from kayaks to aircraft, but the landscape and its potential hazards remain constant. The ancient disappearances hinted at in oral tradition of whole groups that seemingly stepped out of this reality could be the prehistoric template for what we see today. This reframes the entire mystery. It moves it from a series of unfortunate accidents into the realm of a persistent environmental or even metaphysical phenomenon. The land, it seems, has always had a way of making people disappear. The only thing that has evolved is our method of recording it. So the next time you hear a news report of another vanishing in the Alaska wilderness, remember, the trees and the stones and the rivers there might have seen it all before, countless times across the long, silent centuries. These stories of a land that remembers lead us to a place where memory is literally etched in stone, on the remote southern coast of Kodiak Island, where the Pacific crashes against cliffs of dark rock. The past has left its signature. This is Cape Ipiutak, home to one of Alaska's most extensive and enigmatic collections of petroglyphs. Scattered across the wave-smoothed bedrock are hundreds of carvings, a gallery open to the sky and the sea. The images are a testament to a life intimately tied to the ocean. You see the graceful arc of a whale's back, the sleek form of a sea otter, the sturdy outline of a kayak. These are the familiar spirits of the Ipiutak people, a record of respect and reliance on a marine world that provided everything. But among these recognizable forms are figures that stop you cold. Carved with equal care are humanoid shapes, but they are not like us. Some have oversized, round heads. Others stand with arms raised in postures that could be ritual or warning. The most haunting of all are the faces. These are not portraits. They are stark, geometric designs, often just two eyes and a mouth set within a circle or a square. From these faces, straight lines radiate outward like beams of light, or perhaps like spines. To stand before them is to feel you are not looking at a person, but at a concept, a force given form. The debate over what they represent has raged for decades. The most common interpretation points to shamanism. In many northern cultures, a shaman entering a trance state was often depicted with lines emanating from their body, representing spiritual power, connecting chords to the spirit world, or even the sensation of transformation itself. These petroglyphs could be a permanent record of such visions, a way to anchor supernatural power to a specific, powerful place by the sea. Others look at those radiating lines and see something celestial. Could they be star beings, representations of the sun or moon with their rays? The consistent pattern suggests a symbol whose meaning was universally understood by the people who carved them, a code we have lost. Then there are the more speculative theories. Could they be maps, not of land, but of spiritual geography, marking portals or places of particular energy? Or, given Kodiak's position along ancient maritime routes, might they record contact with other seafaring cultures, an attempt to depict visitors who looked or behaved in ways that demanded a new kind of symbol? Their age adds another layer of mystery. Unlike artifacts buried in soil, exposed petroglyphs are notoriously difficult to date. They could be 500 years old, or they could stretch back 1,000 or more. Each tide that washes over them, each winter of frost and ice, slowly erases their details, making them a fading message on a colossal stone parchment. This impermanence is key to their power. The people who made them knew the sea would eventually reclaim their work. This was not art meant for eternity in a museum. It was a conversation with the landscape itself, an offering of memory to the waves and the weather. So we are left with these silent watchers by the shore. They do not tell us a story with a beginning and an end. Instead, they offer a single, powerful glyph, a burst of meaning frozen in time. Were they pleas for a good hunt, records of a vision, warnings, or welcomes? The whales and the otters we can understand, But those faces with their radiant lines speak a different language, one that turns a rocky coast into a sacred text, its pages open to the sky, its words worn smooth by the endless sea. While the petroglyphs speak in silent symbols, another Alaskan culture tells a story of a metal that shaped its very soul. For the Tlingit people of the southeast coast, copper was not merely a resource. It was a sacred substance, a living entity with its own spirit. Their oral histories, passed down through countless generations, speak of a legendary source, a motherlode of pure, native copper known as the copper of the ancestors. This was not the copper from the known coastal mines around places like Prince of Wales Island, which was traded extensively. This was something far more potent and prestigious. It came in thick, gleaming slabs, pulled directly from the earth, soft enough to be worked without smelting. From this sacred material, master artisans crafted the most powerful objects in Tlingit society, the at-u, or sacred treasures. These were massive, shield-like plaques and elaborate helmets, often emblazoned with the crests of high-ranking clans. A single copper shield could be worth an entire canoe filled of furs, and its value was not just economic, it was spiritual and political, a tangible piece of a family's history and honor. The central mystery woven into these stories is one of location. Where was this legendary mine? The oral traditions are deliberately vague, describing a secret inland source, a journey upriver and over mountains, a place guarded by the clans who knew its secret. This stands in direct contrast to the archaeological evidence, which clearly shows extensive copper mining along the coast for thousands of years. So were the stories simply myth? Most scholars think not. They believe the copper of the ancestors refers to a very real, and now lost, deposit of exceptionally pure native copper located deep in the interior, perhaps in the Rangel Mountains or the headwaters of the Alsek or Taku rivers. Finding it would have been a monumental discovery for an ancient prospector, and its secrecy would have been a source of immense power. Controlling such a source meant controlling the flow of the most prestigious material in the North Pacific Trading Network, a network that stretched from Alaska down to what is now Washington State. Theories about its disappearance are as intriguing as the stories themselves. One possibility is that the deposit was simply exhausted, worked out over centuries until the last sacred slab was removed, and its location faded into legend. Another, more dramatic theory suggests a geological event, like a landslide or glacial advance, completely buried the site, sealing it away as if the land itself decided to reclaim its treasure. There is also the haunting possibility that the knowledge was so tightly held by a specific lineage that when that family line died out, perhaps from disease or conflict, the secret died with them. The copper shields that survive in museums today, then, are not just artifacts, they are orphans. They are the last physical remnants of a place that has vanished from both the map and living memory. Their cool, reddish surfaces still bear the hammer marks of the artisans who shaped them, each blow a prayer and a statement of identity. To hold one was to hold a piece of that hidden mountain, a connection to the very bones of the land. So the search continues, not just for a mine, but for understanding. The mystery of the Tlingit's origin copper is a reminder that some of the greatest treasures are not what is found, but what is remembered, a gleaming thread of story connecting a people to a mountain that may no longer wish to be found. The reverence for copper speaks to a culture deeply connected to the land's hidden veins, but what of the land's very shape? In the mist-shrouded valleys of southeastern Alaska, a different kind of claim emerges, one that challenges our perception of the wilderness itself. Here, amidst the dense, temperate rainforest and towering peaks, certain formations have sparked a bold and controversial question. Could there be prehistoric pyramids in the north? The most famous candidate rises near the town of Haines, a distinct, four-sided peak locals simply call the pyramid. From the ground, it is a steep, forested mountain, impressive but not overtly artificial. Yet from the air, its geometry becomes startling. Drone footage reveals a structure with strikingly symmetrical slopes and a flattened, plateau-like summit that seems to defy the typical ragged profile of the surrounding coast mountains. It looks engineered. Further inland, across the vast interior, pilots and researchers have reported other anomalous hills, mounds with a peculiar regularity, rising from the flat tundra with an almost purposeful presence. The immediate and most accepted explanation is geology. Alaska is a land sculpted by unimaginable forces, by glaciers that planed down valleys and left behind drumlins, which are streamlined, elongated hills of glacial debris. It is a realm of permafrost heaves and tectonic uplifts. A symmetrical hill could easily be a glacial remnant, a particularly stubborn nunatak that resisted the ice, or a product of unusual erosion patterns on layered sedimentary rock. Skeptics rightly point out that the human mind is wired to seek patterns, especially faces and pyramids, in random shapes, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. They argue we are seeing the magnificent work of natural chaos and mistaking it for design. Yet, the speculative theories are compelling because they tap into a broader, tantalizing narrative of ancient migration. We know the first peoples crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia tens of thousands of years ago. What if some groups brought with them not just the knowledge of hunting, but architectural concepts? Could a very early, now vanished culture have been influenced by the mound-building traditions that later flourished in places like the Mississippi Valley, or even the stepped pyramids of ancient Mesoamerica? The idea suggests a lost chapter where these migrants, encountering a new world, expressed their cosmology by shaping the very earth, creating ceremonial platforms or territorial markers that have since been reclaimed by forest and soil. The evidence, however, remains infuriatingly ambiguous. No tool marks have been found on these pyramids, no artifacts clustered at their bases, no cultural layer distinct from the surrounding area. They are silent giants. The drone's eye view gives us shape, but it cannot give us context. It shows us a form that whispers of intention, but without a single carved stone or piece of worked bone to accompany it. The whisper fades into the wind. So we are left straddling two worlds. One is a world of magnificent natural coincidence, where ice and time can create forms of breathtaking symmetry. The other is a world of profound historical possibility, where the first Americans might have been builders on a scale we have never dared to imagine. The true mystery of these Alaskan pyramids is not whether they are real, but whether we are listening to the land or to our own longing for a grander, more engineered past. They stand as the ultimate Rorschach test against the sky, and what we see in them may tell us more about ourselves than about the ancient North. The geometric peaks of Alaska's interior hold one version of an ancient past, but the story of human survival in the Arctic is written in a different, more mobile script. Across the northern coasts, a different kind of mystery unfolded, one not of static structures, but of breathtaking movement. This is the enigma of the Thule people, the direct ancestors of the modern Inuit. Around 1,000 years after the Common Era, something extraordinary happened. From their origins in what is now Alaska, these master Arctic engineers launched a rapid, unstoppable expansion eastward. Within just a few centuries, their communities dotted the coasts of the Canadian Arctic and reached all the way to Greenland. Their success was undeniable, built on brilliant, specialized technology. They perfected the sleek, fast Umiak boat for hunting the massive bowhead whale. They developed the kajak, the incredibly stable kayak, for hunting seals. Their semi-subterranean sod houses, framed with whale bone and stone, were marvels of insulation against the brutal cold. They were the ultimate Arctic adaptation, a culture so perfectly suited to its environment that it seemed to explode across the top of the world. But their very brilliance begs a profound question. What was the spark? What force propelled this swift and total migration? The archaeological record shows a clear trail of artifacts from Alaska to Greenland, but the motivation remains a puzzle with several compelling and competing pieces. One dominant theory points to climate. The period from around 900 to 1300 was the medieval warm period, a time of milder temperatures across the northern hemisphere. For the Arctic, this meant less sea ice. While that might sound beneficial, it actually created a specific opportunity. Less ice allowed for longer open water seasons, which in turn could have spurred a population boom for bowhead whales, the Thule's most prized resource. Imagine a culture whose entire spiritual and physical world revolved around the whale. If reports began to filter back from the east of richer hunting grounds, of whales more plentiful than ever before, it would have been an irresistible pull. The Thule, with their superior hunting tools, may have simply followed their prey, a maritime migration chasing plenty across the Arctic seas. Another theory suggests a push rather than a pull. Perhaps population pressure in their Alaskan homeland forced groups to seek new territories. As successful communities grew, resources in a given area could become strained, leading younger generations to voyage eastward in search of unclaimed coasts and new hunting ranges. This is a classic human story, one of expansion driven by necessity. Yet, the most intriguing part of the Thule mystery might lie not in where they went, but in where they started. The archaeological record of their earliest development in Alaska itself is frustratingly thin. We can see the fully formed Thule culture appearing almost as if from nowhere, already equipped with their complete technological package. Where are the clear, gradual prototypes of their iconic tools? Where are the experimental, clumsy versions of the Ipiutak or the harpoon? This gap suggests one of two things. Either the crucial development phase happened in an area that has since been lost to rising sea levels or coastal erosion, swallowed by the very ocean they mastered. Or their innovation was so rapid, a cultural and technological big bang, that it left few intermediate steps in the ground. This missing chapter is what makes the Thule expansion so haunting. We see the effect, a culture conquering the Arctic, but the cause remains just out of focus. Was it a changing climate that opened a door? Was it the deep-seated human drive to explore and settle new lands? Or was it something as simple and as powerful as the sight of a bowhead whale's spout on the eastern horizon, a beacon of survival calling them forward into the unknown ice? Their story is not one of a lost civilization, but of a found one, a people who solved the Arctic so completely that their legacy is written in the living cultures of the North today. Yet, the quiet question lingers in the wind. Why did they leave home, and what forgotten trials shaped them before their great journey began? The Thule people mastered a world of ice and open water, but the very seas that carried them eastward hold a deeper, more submerged secret. Along the convoluted coastlines of Alaska, from the southeast panhandle to the shallow waters of the Bering Sea, lie landscapes that time forgot. These are the sunken forests. At certain extreme low tides, or through the ghostly green lens of sonar, a haunting vista emerges. Massive tree stumps, their roots still gripping the ancient soil, stand in silent groves on the seafloor. Logs the size of telephone poles lie scattered like matchsticks, preserved in the cold, oxygen-poor water for millennia. These are not driftwood. They are the remains of vast, living ecosystems that thrived when the coastline was dozens of miles further out. Their existence is a stark geological fact. During the last ice age, so much of the planet's water was locked up in colossal glaciers that global sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. What is now the continental shelf was dry land, a broad, fertile plain connecting continents and hosting forests of spruce and hemlock. Then, as the world warmed and the ice sheets melted, the ocean began its long, relentless return. It did not simply flood empty beaches, it drowned entire worlds. The stumps we see today are the tombstones of that lost geography. But the true mystery these drowned forests whisper is not geological, it is human. For thousands of years, that exposed continental shelf was not a submerged wasteland. It was prime real estate for early human populations. It offered flat terrain, rich estuaries teeming with fish and game, and river valleys that are now undersea canyons. If people were in Alaska, as we know they were for at least 14,000 years, they almost certainly lived, hunted, and built their camps on these coastal plains. So the haunting question becomes, what lies buried beneath the silt and kelp? The potential is staggering. We could be looking at the greatest archaeological site on the continent, and it is entirely underwater. Imagine a stone tool workshop, its lithic scatter now covered by sand. Picture the post holes of a seasonal village, now home to starfish. Consider the possibility of hunting blinds, fish weirs, or even ceremonial sites, all preserved in the cold, dark mud like a time capsule. The most tantalizing finds from similar submerged sites elsewhere in the world, like Doggerland in the North Sea, include not just tools, but human remains, art, and evidence of structured settlements. For Alaska, this sunken landscape could hold the missing pieces of the earliest migration stories, showing not just that people passed through, but exactly how they lived on that vast, now vanished bridge between worlds. This idea connects directly to some of humanity's most persistent myths, cultures across the globe, from the Welsh legend of Cantre'r Gwaelod to the Indian stories of Cymru Candom, speak of advanced lands lost beneath the waves. While these are often considered folklore, they likely hold a kernel of ancestral memory, a collective echo of a time when the oceans rose and swallowed the homes of our distant ancestors. Alaska's sunken forests are not a myth, they are a physical, provable fact. They are the real-world foundation upon which such stories could be built. Every stump is a marker of a coastline that retreated, a reminder that the map is not permanent. The slow creep of modern sea level rise adds a chilling layer of relevance to this ancient mystery. As our own shores erode, we are witnessing in miniature the same process that once drowned continents. It forces us to ask what evidence of our own civilization might someday lie on a future seafloor, waiting for some far future explorer to puzzle over. For now, these underwater groves remain largely unexplored, a frontier as challenging as space. They guard their secrets in the silent, crushing dark, a lost chapter of human history written not on stone, but on a seafloor that was once a forest floor, waiting for the tide of discovery to turn. These drowned forests hold the potential to rewrite our deepest history, a history that begins not on the land we see, but on the land that vanished. For millennia, the Bering Land Bridge was not a bridge at all, but a continent. Geologists call it Beringia, a vast, grassy plain the size of Texas, connecting Siberia to Alaska during the Ice Ages. We understand the mechanics of its existence, how lower sea levels exposed this fertile shelf. The conventional story is clear: nomadic hunters tracking mammoth and bison crossed this plain around 13,000 years ago, becoming the first people of the Americas. This is the club's first theory, neat and orderly, but the artifacts, those stubborn physical clues, tell a messier, far more intriguing tale. Scattered across Alaska and eastern Siberia are objects that refuse to fit the timeline. These are the anomalies, the artifacts that whisper of a much older human presence. At sites like the Bluefish Caves in the Yukon, stone tools and butchered animal bones have been dated to a staggering 24,000 years ago, long before the Clovis culture emerged. The tools themselves are different, cruder in some ways, more specialized in others. They are not the elegant, fluted spear points of the Clovis people, but sharp flakes and simple blades, the toolkit of a people adapting to an even harsher, glacial world. Even more mysterious are objects that hint at something beyond mere survival. In recent years, excavations at a site known as the Tanana River Valley have uncovered possible art objects, small stones with faint, deliberate grooves and patterns. They are not obviously figurative, but their markings are consistent and non-utilitarian, suggesting a symbolic mind at work. If verified, these would be among the oldest expressions of art in the Western Hemisphere, a whisper of culture from a time we thought was silent. Each of these finds is a pebble thrown into the pond of established history, sending out ripples of controversy. They fuel the heated debate over who the first people really were. Were they a single wave, as long believed, or multiple, separate migrations arriving by different routes and at different times? The Bering Land Bridge was not a turnstile used once. It was a highway open for thousands of years. Could other, now vanished cultures have traversed it? Some researchers point to stylistic links between very early Alaskan tools and those from the Solutrean culture in prehistoric Europe, suggesting a daring ice-edge migration across the Atlantic, a theory that remains on the fringes but is fiercely debated. Others see stronger connections to ancient Siberian groups whose full archaeological record is also lost beneath the waves of the rising Bering Sea. The most haunting possibility is that people did not just cross Beringia, they lived there for generations. The now submerged plain was not a barren corridor, but a habitable refuge with its own rivers, lakes, and abundant game. Could there have been settlements, camps, even spiritual sites on that lost continent? Every strange, out-of-place artifact pulled from the Alaskan tundra could be a fragment from that drowned world, washed ashore by time and tide. These objects are more than just rocks. They are messages in a bottle from a sunken world. They challenge the clean narrative and force us to confront a profound uncertainty. The first chapter of the human story in the Americas is not a settled fact in a textbook. It is a puzzle missing most of its pieces, with the most important ones likely resting on the dark, silent floor of the Bering Sea. These submerged landscapes and their lost artifacts hint at a world inhabited long before our histories began. But what if the memory of those first inhabitants never truly faded? Woven into the very fabric of Alaska native oral tradition is a persistent and haunting presence, a race of beings known by many names, but perhaps most commonly as the Pal-Rayuke, the Little People. Across the vast cultural tapestry, from the Inupiat of the Arctic coast to the Tlingit of the southeast rainforest, the stories echo with remarkable consistency. They are described as small in stature, often no taller than a child, yet possessing immense strength, supernatural skill, or potent magic. They were not considered mythical creatures in the way of dragons or fairies, but as a real people who occupied the land in a distant, primordial time. To the Inupiat, they were master hunters who could bring down caribou with a single, perfectly thrown tiny spear. In Tlingit stories, they are often clever tricksters, capable of bewildering humans, stealing food, or leading travelers astray with their enchantments. They lived in hidden places, within hollow hills, beneath large rocks, or deep inside dense forests, always just beyond the periphery of the human world. The question these legends inevitably raise is a profound one. What is the origin of such a widespread and detailed belief? One compelling theory looks to the deep past, to paleoanthropology. We now know that our own species, Homo sapiens, shared the planet with other human forms, like the Neanderthals in Europe, and, crucially, the diminutive Homo floresiensis, discovered on the Indonesian island of Flores. Nicknamed the Hobbit, this species stood about 3 feet tall and survived until relatively recently, perhaps as late as 50,000 years ago. While no such remains have been found in Alaska, the concept opens a fascinating door. Could the legends of the Little People be a distant, cultural memory of an encounter with a different kind of human? If early Homo sapiens migrating across Beringia encountered, or even coexisted with, a remnant population of another hominin species, the event would have been so extraordinary it could have been etched into collective memory for thousands of years, distilled over generations into the stories we hear today. The small stature, the different appearance, the perceived magical abilities born of unfamiliar technology or behavior, all could fit. Another interpretation is more symbolic, viewing the stories as a metaphorical representation of other human groups. In a land of vast distances and scarce resources, a rival tribe, perhaps one that was physically smaller or more elusive, could easily become mythologized over time. Their superior hunting techniques or unfamiliar customs might be explained as supernatural powers. The legends then serve as both a cautionary tale about the unknown and a way to explain the mysterious traces left by others: an abandoned campsite, a strange footprint, a tool found in an unexpected place. But to reduce these stories to mere history or sociology may miss their deeper power. For the cultures that tell them, the Pal Reuke are often very real spiritual forces. They explain the uncanny, the unexplained rustle in the brush that isn't an animal, the feeling of being watched in an empty valley, the tool that goes missing from a known spot. They personify the capricious nature of the wilderness itself, a reminder that humans are not the sole masters of the land, that there are older, subtler powers one must respect. To dismiss them as simple folklore is to ignore a profound truth. These stories are a map of a different kind of understanding. They chart a landscape alive with consciousness, where every strange rock formation or lonely hill might be a home, and every successful hunt might depend on not offending unseen neighbors. So the next time you walk through a silent Alaskan forest or scan an empty tundra, consider the weight of that silence. It might not be empty at all, but simply occupied by those who were here first, watching from just behind the veil of the world, remembered not in bone or stone, but in stories told for 10,000 years around the fire. The legends of the little people map a landscape watched by unseen eyes, but what if those same eyes were also trained on the heavens? Across Alaska, the stones themselves may hold a different kind of memory, one not of spirits, but of stars. Scattered in remote valleys and along lonely coasts are formations and carvings that whisper of an ancient sky. This is the subtle, controversial mystery of astronomical alignment. Unlike the grand stone circles of Europe, the evidence here is fragile, easily dismissed, yet persistently compelling. Take the petroglyphs at Cape Ipiutak once more. Among the whales and strange faces, some researchers have noted specific carvings, like a series of dots or a particular groove, that align perfectly with the setting sun on the summer solstice. On that one day each year, as the sun dips toward the Pacific horizon, a sliver of light might slide precisely along that carved channel, illuminating a symbol otherwise lost in shadow. It is a fleeting moment, a connection between earth and sky that feels too deliberate to be chance. Then there are the scattered reports from pilots and backcountry travelers of what they call rings of stones. These are not the majestic, vertical monoliths of other cultures, but low circles of gathered rocks, sometimes just one stone high, sitting on open tundra or a mountain pass. From the ground, they can look like simple hunting blinds or the remains of a tent ring, but from above, their perfect circularity becomes apparent. Their purpose is a riddle. Could they have been ceremonial spaces, or something far more precise? The most tantalizing theory is that they served as horizon calendars. By sitting in the center of such a ring, an observer could watch the sun rise or set behind specific notches in the distant mountains. A stone placed on the circumference might mark the solstice sunrise, another the equinox. Over generations, such a simple structure could track the passage of seasons, predict the return of migrating caribou herds, or signal the time for salmon runs. The challenge, as always in Alaska, is proving intentionality. This is a land shaped by glaciers, a place where frost heave can push rocks into neat circles, and where landslides can create surprisingly linear formations. The human mind seeks pattern, and in a wilderness of random stone, it is easy to see cosmic design where none exists. A ring that looks man-made might be the result of a long melted ice lens pushing rocks outward. A solstice alignment at a petroglyph site could be a happy accident of the local topography. So how do we distinguish ancient observatory from natural coincidence? Archaeoastronomers look for repetition and context. One aligned petroglyph is intriguing, but a panel with multiple carvings that each correspond to different celestial events is far more persuasive. A single stone ring is questionable, but a series of them along a migratory route, all with similar solar alignments, suggests a cultural practice. The evidence remains thin, often anecdotal, which is why this mystery sits at the very edge of accepted research. Yet, the possibility is profound. It suggests that ancient Alaskans were not just surviving the extremes of their environment, but systematically studying them. They were intimate readers of the sky's clock. Their survival depended on an exquisite awareness of timing, the precise moment when the ice would break up, when the plants would bud, when the game would move. What we might call astronomy, they knew as the essential rhythm of life. The purpose of this knowledge, then, was not abstract science. It was practical spirituality. Aligning a stone to catch the solstice sun was an act of communion with the forces that govern their world. It was a way to anchor their community to the cosmic cycle, to reaffirm that even in the deepest winter, the sun would indeed return. It transformed the terrifying vastness of the Arctic night into a predictable, patterned tapestry. So these quiet rings of stone and subtly aligned petroglyphs pose a quiet revolution. They ask us to look past the notion of ancient peoples as simple hunter-gatherers and see them instead as meticulous astronomers of their own latitude. Their observatory was the entire horizon. Their instruments were rocks and memory, and their data was written not on paper, but in the returning light of the sun itself. The sky was their calendar, but the land held a people who vanished before their story could be fully written. Long before the Thule's triumphant expansion, another culture held the Arctic, a people known today as the Dorset, or in Inuit oral history, the Tuniat. They were the ghost in the machine of northern prehistory, occupying the coastal fringes of Alaska and across the Canadian Arctic for nearly 2,000 years. Their world was one of profound silence and exquisite craftsmanship. Unlike the whale-hunting Thule who came after, the Dorset were masters of a smaller, more intimate scale. Their signature artifacts are tiny, breathtaking carvings in ivory and bone, so delicate they seem to defy the harsh world that produced them. These are not crude figures. They are miniature polar bears, seals, and human forms, each curve and line rendered with a sensitivity that speaks of deep observation and spiritual connection. Perhaps most haunting are the enigmatic, flying or swimming human figures, carvings that appear to be in motion, arms outstretched as if gliding through air or water. They hint at a rich shamanic tradition, a belief in transformation and travel between worlds. Their tools were equally distinctive, featuring small, razor-sharp microblades that could be set into slots in bone or antler handles. This was a technology of precision, not power, suited to a life focused on sealing and fishing from the ice edge rather than pursuing the great whales. For centuries, the Dorset thrived in their icy niche, and then something shifted. The core of their mystery is not just that they disappeared, but the strange pattern of that disappearance. In Alaska and the Western Arctic, the Dorset vanish from the archaeological record centuries before the Thule people ever arrived. It is as if they simply faded away in place, leaving no one to greet the newcomers. Yet, in the eastern Arctic, in Greenland, and the Canadian high Arctic, they persisted for hundreds of years more, only finally disappearing shortly after the Thule expansion reached those shores. This staggered collapse presents a puzzle with several interlocking pieces. One dominant theory points to a changing climate. The medieval warm period, which may have helped the Thule, could have been a disaster for the Dorset. Their entire way of life was built on the stability of sea ice. Warmer temperatures meant less reliable ice, shorter seasons for seal hunting at breathing holes, and unpredictable conditions. A culture exquisitely adapted to a specific environment can be the most vulnerable when that environment changes. Another theory suggests a slower, more insidious decline. The Dorset may have faced increased competition for resources from other groups, perhaps ancestors of the Inupiat, moving into their territories from the west. Without the large umiaks and whaling technology, the Dorset might have been gradually outcompeted, their populations shrinking and fragmenting until they could no longer sustain their cultural traditions. The most poignant possibility involves a kind of cultural exhaustion. Living in small, isolated groups in one of the planet's most demanding environments places immense stress on a society. Some researchers speculate that their intricate spiritual system, reflected in those beautiful carvings, may have become rigid, unable to adapt to new challenges. A series of bad hunting years, a shift in animal migration patterns, or a disease introduced through distant trade contacts could have pushed an already stressed society past a tipping point. Their longer survival in the East might simply be a story of refuge, of groups holding out in the most remote fastnesses until the final wave of change, in the form of the dynamic Thule culture, eventually reached them. The silence they left behind is profound. The Thule ancestors who later inhabited the same beaches would find Dorset sites and tell stories of the Tuniad, a powerful but gentle people who were giants in strength, yet were eventually driven away. Those stories, passed down for generations, became the echo of a real people, so we are left with those tiny ivory bears held in a museum case. They are not just art, they are the last whispers of a world that made sense of the ice in its own way. The Dorset did not fail. They perfected a life for their time, and then their time ended. Their disappearance asks us a difficult question. What does it mean for a civilization to end not with a bang, but with a slow, silent fading, like a footprint vanishing under falling snow? The Dorset vanished into the long winter, but the permafrost holds other lives suspended in time. In the summer of 1979, a gold miner named Walter Roman was operating a hydraulic hose near Fairbanks, Alaska, when he saw something strange emerge from the mud. It was a massive, blue-hued head, followed by a shoulder, then an entire frozen carcass of an animal unlike anything alive today. This was Blue Babe, a steppe bison that had walked Alaska 36,000 years ago. The creature was so perfectly preserved that the scar from an American lion's attack was still visible on its hide, and clumps of its autumn fur remained intact. For scientists, it was a time capsule, offering an unprecedented look at the Pleistocene world. But Blue Babe is more than a fascinating specimen. It is a key piece in one of archaeology's greatest whodunits, the sudden vanishing of the Ice Age giants. Across Alaska, the bones of mammoths, mastodons, giant short-faced bears, and saber-toothed cats lie scattered in the silt, a ghostly assembly of megafauna that once dominated the landscape. Then, roughly 12,000 years ago, they were almost all gone. The question of what caused this mass extinction is a fierce, unresolved debate, and at its heart lies the mystery of humanity's own arrival. On one side of the argument is climate change. The end of the last ice age was a period of dramatic upheaval. As glaciers retreated, ecosystems transformed. The vast, dry grasslands known as the Mammoth Steppe, which supported herds of giant herbivores, were replaced by wetter tundra and boreal forest. This shift in habitat and available food could have pushed these specialized animals past a point of no return. It is a compelling natural explanation, yet the other suspect in the mystery is us. The timeline is suspiciously coincidental. The disappearance of the megafauna aligns closely with strong evidence of human presence spreading across the continent. This has led to the overkill hypothesis, the idea that the first Americans, with their sophisticated Clovis spear points, hunted these animals to extinction. The evidence is tantalizing but fragmentary. At several Alaskan sites, mammoth bones have been found with what appear to be cut marks from stone tools, and some bones show spiral fractures consistent with humans breaking them open for marrow. A few sites even suggest the possibility of mammoth kill sites or butchering stations. If verified, these finds would be the smoking gun, proving humans hunted these titans. But the case is far from closed. Skeptics point out that such marks can be made by natural processes, like trampling or carnivore gnawing. More importantly, there is a startling lack of clear, undeniable kill sites associated with Clovis hunters and Alaskan megafauna, especially compared to sites further south. This absence is itself a mystery. Were the populations of both humans and megafauna so sparse in Alaska that direct encounters were rare? Or did these early people employ hunting strategies that left little archaeological trace? The story of Blue Babe adds a crucial layer of nuance. Its death was natural, the result of a predator's attack. Its preservation was a gift of the frozen ground. It shows us a world that existed for tens of thousands of years before humans likely arrived in force, a stable ecosystem of incredible creatures. Its very existence argues that these animals were resilient, surviving through multiple glacial cycles. So what changed? The most likely answer is not a single villain, but a perfect storm. A rapidly changing climate stressed the populations of these massive animals, shrinking their habitats and food sources. Then, a new and highly efficient predator arrived on the scene. Humans did not need to kill every last mammoth. They only needed to tip an already precarious balance. Each hunting success removed not just one animal, but a female that would never bear young, or a matriarch whose knowledge of migration routes died with her. The cumulative effect over centuries could have been catastrophic. The frozen remains are the silent witnesses: a mammoth tusk with a possible tool groove, a bison skull with an embedded stone point fragment. These are the cryptic clues in a prehistoric cold case. They force us to confront our own legacy. Did the first Alaskans walk into a land of plenty and, through no malice but simply by being human, help unravel an ancient world? Or were they merely witnesses to a natural ending written by the climate? The permafrost continues to melt, revealing more bones and perhaps more answers. Each new discovery is another piece of the puzzle, a reminder that the greatest extinction event since the dinosaurs may hold a reflection of ourselves, hunters standing at the edge of a vanishing wilderness. The bones of the great mammals tell one story, but on a windswept beach in northwest Alaska, a different kind of marine mystery lies buried. At Cape Krusenstern, a massive complex of ancient beach ridges curves along the Chukchi Sea. Archaeologists digging into a ridge formed over 4,000 years ago made a startling discovery. They found the remains of a people they call the Old Whaling Culture, dating to around 2,000 years before the Common Era. What they uncovered was not just a campsite, but a profound anomaly. These people were hunting and processing massive bowhead whales, one of the largest animals on Earth, with a toolkit that seems almost shockingly simple by later standards. Their technology was primitive, centered on stone tools, with no evidence of the sophisticated toggling harpoons and floats that later cultures like the Thule would master. They used large, crude stone blades, likely hafted onto wooden shafts, and heavy stone weights that might have been used to anchor skin boats or drag carcasses. Yet the evidence is undeniable: piles of whale bones, some with clear-cut marks from their tools, mixed with the charcoal of their fires. They were not just scavenging beached whales, they were actively hunting them from the open sea. This presents an immense logistical puzzle. Imagine this scene: a group of hunters in skin boats, likely similar to Ipiutaks, but without the later refinements, paddling out into the icy, treacherous waters of the Chukchi Sea. They're armed with thrusting spears tipped with stone, not with the detachable, self-sealing harpoon heads that ensure a kill. To successfully take down a bowhead, a creature that can be 60 feet long and weigh 100 tons, would require not just bravery, but an almost supernatural coordination and understanding of the animal's anatomy. One misplaced strike, and the whale would sound, diving deep and taking their precious stone point with it. Their success implies a maritime expertise we can barely comprehend. They must have possessed an intimate knowledge of whale behavior, migration routes, and ocean currents. Their social organization had to be flawless, with crews working in silent, practiced harmony. The butchering of such a colossal catch on the beach would have been a monumental task in itself, requiring every member of the community and days of relentless work. A single successful hunt could feed a village for months, providing not just meat, but blubber for oil and bone for tools. Yet, this culture that cracked the code of Arctic whaling appears in the archaeological record for only a brief moment, perhaps a few centuries, and then vanishes completely. There is no gradual evolution into later cultures, no clear trail of their technology being adopted or improved upon by others. It is as if this specialized knowledge was discovered, perfected, and then lost, all within the blink of an eye in archaeological terms. So who were they? One theory suggests they were a pioneering group from Siberia, crossing the Bering Strait with a bold new idea and finding a rich, unexploited niche. Another possibility is that they were an isolated local population that stumbled upon a revolutionary technique, a cultural flash in the pan that could not be sustained when climate shifts altered whale migrations or sea ice patterns. Their disappearance is as enigmatic as their skill. Did a series of catastrophic hunting failures or a change in the environment wipe them out? Or were they simply absorbed by other groups, their unique whaling tradition dissolving into the broader cultural landscape? The old whaling culture stands as a ghost in the lineage of Arctic survival. They achieved one of the most difficult feats imaginable with what we would consider rudimentary tools, then slipped back into the fog of time, leaving behind only stone blades and whale bones on a lonely beach to testify to their brief, brilliant mastery of the Northern Sea. The frozen remains of Blue Babe and the stone tools of ancient whalers give us fragments of a story, but to find a chapter written in human breath and bone, we must go underground. On the southern tip of Prince of Wales Island, beneath a dense canopy of old-growth rainforest, lies a portal to that distant past. This is On Your Knees Cave, a place whose name hints at the reverence, or perhaps the sheer physical effort, required to enter it. In the mid-1990s, this cave yielded a discovery that rewrote the first pages of human history in the Americas. Archaeologists, crawling through its narrow limestone passages, unearthed the skeletal remains of a young man, along with stone tools and the bones of animals he may have hunted. Radiocarbon dating delivered a staggering number. These remains were 10,300 years old. This was not just another collection of ancient artifacts. This was a person, one of the earliest known individuals to have lived and died along this coast. The bones themselves were a time capsule, but the real revolution came from what they held within. Scientists were able to extract mitochondrial DNA from the remains, a genetic blueprint passed down through the maternal line. The results were a profound surprise, forging a direct and undeniable link. The genetic signature of this young man showed clear ancestry from ancient Siberian populations, confirming the Beringian migration route. Yet, his DNA also held a distinct lineage that was uniquely Native American, a branch that had already begun to diverge and evolve in the New World. This single individual became a living bridge, a snapshot of a population in motion. He carried the old world in his cells, but he was unmistakably of the new one. His very being answered a monumental question while raising a host of intimate, haunting new ones. Who was he? The cave offers cryptic clues. The stone tools found with him, made from a distinctive chert not local to the island, suggest he was part of a mobile, maritime-adapted culture, capable of traveling by boat across the complex island waterways of the Alexander Archipelago. The animal bones, from species like harbor seal and river otter, paint a picture of a skilled coastal hunter, but the cave itself poses the central riddle. What was he doing there? Caves in such environments are rarely comfortable long-term homes. They are cold, damp, and dark. Was this a temporary shelter during a storm or a hunting trip? Or was it something more? Caves across human cultures have often been seen as liminal spaces, gateways between worlds, used for ritual, burial, or vision quests. The placement of his remains deep within the cave could indicate a deliberate burial, a sacred act by his people. Was On Your Knees Cave a landmark in a spiritual geography, a place where the living world met the underworld? The truth is likely a blend of the practical and the profound. For a coastal people, a cave could be a strategic campsite, a place to butcher a seal out of the rain, and also a chamber that echoed with power, where the drip of water and the weight of stone inspired stories of creation and the afterlife. The young man from the cave forces us to reconcile two histories, the grand narrative of continental migration and the personal story of one life lived in a specific, shadowy place 10 millennia ago. His genetic story is now a foundational thread in the tapestry of Native American ancestry, but his individual silence is deafening. We know where his people came from, but we do not know why he was in that cave or how he died. And this leads to the final, tantalizing thought. Prince of Wales Island is a labyrinth of karst topography, riddled with thousands of caves, most of which have never been entered by an archaeologist. If one cave held a 10,000-year-old secret, what lies in the others? Each dark passage could be a sealed archive, holding tools, art, or more remains that could further unravel the journey of the first Alaskans. The stone waits, and the stories are still buried, resting in the perpetual dark just beyond our flashlight beams. The young man from On Your Knees Cave almost certainly arrived by boat, navigating the intricate waterways of the Alexander Archipelago. This simple fact points to a deeper, more elusive maritime mystery. For all we know about the skin boats of the Thule or the kayaks of the Aleut, the archaeological record of ancient Alaskan watercraft is full of puzzling gaps and strange fragments. Occasionally, researchers uncover pieces that do not fit the established timeline, artifacts that whisper of boat designs lost to time. These are the umiaks that shouldn't exist. Imagine a fragment of a wooden frame, carbon dated to a period long before the classic Thule culture, found in a peat bog far from the current coastline. Its curvature is different, its joinery unfamiliar, or consider a petroglyph on a secluded beach depicting a vessel with a high prow and a sail, a feature not associated with the classic skin boats of the North. These anomalous finds are rare and often controversial, but they ignite a compelling question. Could ancient Alaskans have developed sophisticated, ocean-worthy vessels much earlier than we think, and for purposes far beyond coastal hunting? The standard narrative is clear. The progression moves from simple, skin-covered frames to the magnificent open umiaks used for whaling and the decked-over kayaks for hunting. This technology peaks with the Thule expansion, but what if that story is incomplete? The Bering Sea and the North Pacific are not gentle waterways. They are realms of fog, sudden storms, and powerful currents. To hunt the great whales consistently, or to travel between distant islands, would require vessels of immense strength and seaworthiness. Some researchers looking at the scattered evidence speculate about proto-Umiaks, larger and more robust designs that might have enabled not just seasonal hunting, but deliberate exploration. This speculation opens a door to one of archaeology's most tantalizing and hotly debated possibilities: ancient transoceanic contact. On one side of the Pacific, in Alaska, we find certain artifact styles, particular ways of carving or notching stone, or motifs in ancient art that bear a vague, stylistic resemblance to artifacts from prehistoric Japan, Korea, or even further south. These are not clear, identical matches, but faint echoes. A similar type of labret, or lip plug, appears in very old contexts on both sides of the sea. A specific method of grinding slate into points shows up in widely separated locations. The similarities are never enough to prove direct connection, but they are persistent enough to be deeply intriguing. If these echoes are more than coincidence, how could such contact have occurred? The prevailing winds and currents of the North Pacific create a natural highway, the Great Clockwise Gyre. A vessel caught in these currents, whether by accident or design, could be carried from the coasts of East Asia to the shores of the Aleutian Islands, or even the Alaskan mainland, over a period of weeks or months. This is not a theory of planned colonization, but one of chance encounters and incremental knowledge. A single fishing boat blown off course, surviving a horrific journey to make landfall on a strange shore. The survivors, if any, would bring with them not just their physical selves, but their technology, their art styles, and their stories. Even if they did not survive, their boat, its construction and design, would become an object of intense study for whoever found it wrecked on the beach. This is where the idea of the anomalous Umiak becomes central. For such a voyage to be anything but a fatal accident, the boat itself would need to be a masterpiece of ancient engineering. It would need ample freeboard to handle Pacific swells, some form of stabilized storage for water and food, and perhaps even a simple fixed sail to harness the wind. A skin-covered frame, if built on a large enough scale and with carefully selected materials, could potentially meet these demands. The knowledge to build such a vessel would represent a high watermark of prehistoric technology, a secret perhaps held by only a few coastal clans and lost when they disappeared. The true mystery, then, is not necessarily finding a Japanese sword on an Alaskan beach, which we never do. It is in the subtle, almost ghostly transmission of an idea. Could a shipwright from a distant land have shared a better way to lash a frame, a technique that then spread slowly along the trade networks of the North Pacific Rim? Could the story of strange visitors from across the sea have become embedded in oral tradition, transforming over millennia into legends of the first people emerging from the ocean? The boat fragments that confuse us, the petroglyphs that show unfamiliar silhouettes, they are the potential physical anchors for these ancient whispers. They suggest a northern world that was never truly isolated, but was occasionally, unpredictably, touched by the wider currents of human innovation, leaving behind only the faintest signature in wood, stone, and story. The silent permafrost holds more than bones. It is a deep freeze for human ingenuity, preserving artifacts so fragile they vanish everywhere else on Earth. While the frozen mummies of places like the Alps capture headlines, Alaska's frozen ground offers a different treasure, a library of everyday genius. Here, the cold has perfectly suspended objects made of wood, leather, sinew, and grass, materials that normally rot away in a single season. These are not grand monuments, but the intimate tools of survival, and their preservation reveals a startling truth. The technological sophistication of ancient Arctic cultures was often far beyond what archaeologists once assumed. Take the simple spear thrower or atlatl. We know them as stone weights or carved hooks from drier sites, but in the permafrost, we find the complete object, a graceful, polished wood shaft, perfectly balanced to fit a hunter's hand. The wood shows careful selection for grain and flexibility, shaped and smoothed over hours. Attached with intricate lashings of sinew, we might find a carved ivory hook designed to cradle the end of a dart, transferring every ounce of the hunter's strength into a projectile that could fly with deadly force and accuracy. This is not a crude stick. It is a precision-engineered piece of ballistic technology, refined over generations. Then there is the cordage, the humble string. In the permafrost, we find it perfectly intact, twisted from strands of sinew or braided from tough grasses. The complexity is breathtaking. Some cords are two-ply, others are intricate braids of multiple strands, each technique chosen for a specific purpose: to hold weight, to resist abrasion, to remain flexible in freezing temperatures. The knowledge encoded in that string is profound, an understanding of material properties, tensile strength, and knot theory that was essential for building shelters, setting snares, and sewing clothing that meant the difference between life and death. Perhaps most telling is the clothing. A frozen cache might reveal a complete parka, sewn from caribou hide with the fur turned inward for warmth. But look closer. The stitching is unbelievably fine, the thread made from sinew so thin it seems impossible. The seams are often double-stitched and sealed with fat to make them waterproof. The patterns are complex, pieced together from dozens of individually tailored hides to conserve material and fit the body's movement. Adornments of dyed leather strips or delicate dentalium shells speak of an aesthetic sense, a desire for beauty even in the harshest environment. Each of these artifacts is a solved problem, a perfect answer to a life-or-death question of physics, biology, and chemistry. They reveal a daily life built on a foundation of expert-level skills that were second nature, passed down from elder to child through countless hours of practice. We can reconstruct the stone tool from a chip of flint, but we could never have imagined the exact spring of a sinew snare or the specific flex of a hunting bow without seeing it preserved. This leads to the deeper mystery these tools imply, the lost rituals of their making, the process of curing a hide, of twisting sinew, of seasoning wood, was not just mechanical, it was often sacred. Songs, stories, and taboos likely accompanied each step, embedding the technical knowledge within a spiritual framework. The tool was not just an object, it was a relationship with the animal that provided the material, with the ancestor who taught the skill, with the spirit that granted success. When we see a perfectly preserved mitten, we are seeing the end product of a rich cultural ceremony that has been utterly lost. So we must ask, with so much already revealed, what remains hidden? The permafrost is melting at an alarming rate, exposing secrets it has held for millennia. What game-changing artifact still lies frozen, waiting for the thaw? Could it be a complete early kayak frame, showing a design predating all others, a woven basket containing the remnants of a ritual meal, seeds, and feathers that tell a new story of ancient trade? Or perhaps a wooden mask with traces of pigment, a face from a ceremony no living person remembers. Each perfectly preserved item rewrites a line in the manual of human history. The greatest mystery locked in the ice may not be a single spectacular find, but the slow, heartbreaking revelation of an entire world of skill and wisdom, melting into view just as it is finally lost forever. The tools preserved in permafrost speak a language of survival, but the true voices of ancient Alaska are found in a different kind of artifact, one that is spoken, not carved. The linguistic landscape of the North is a profound puzzle in itself. Today, Alaska is home to an astonishing diversity of indigenous language families, each as distinct from the others as English is from Chinese. You have the Eskimo Aleut languages, spanning from the Siberian Yupik of St. Lawrence Island to the Inupiaq of the North Slope and the Alutiiq of the South Coast. Then there are the Na-Dene languages, like the various Athabascan tongues of the interior, including Gwich'in and Koyukon, isolated on the southern panhandle, or the Haida and Tsimshianic languages, each standing as their own unique family. This is not a simple dialect chain. These are deep, fundamental divisions that represent thousands of years of separate development. The mystery these languages present is one of human history on a continental scale. How did such radically different ways of speaking come to coexist in one region? The dominant theory points not to a single migration, but to multiple, separate waves of people crossing the ancient Bering Land Bridge over millennia, each bringing their own tongue. Think of it not as one group walking over, but as distinct chapters in a long story of human movement. The first wave, perhaps over 15,000 years ago, may have spoken a language that is now completely lost, its descendants spreading south to populate the rest of the Americas. Later, a new wave speaking a Proto-Na-Dene language might have arrived, settling the interior forests and mountains. Much later still, ancestors of the Eskimo Aleut speakers made their journey, becoming the masters of the Arctic coasts. The isolated presence of Haida and Tsimshianic could represent even more distinct migrations, perhaps by sea along the coast. But languages are not static fossils. They are living things that absorb and change. This is where the deeper mystery lies. Could the linguistic map hold ghostly traces of populations that vanished long ago? Linguists sometimes find what they call substrate influences, subtle fingerprints left on a language by a people who were absorbed or displaced. It might be a strange place name that doesn't fit the grammar of the current language, a mountain, a river, a bay with a name that translates to nothing in the local tongue, yet has been used for generations. These could be the last echoes of a name given by a people whose language is otherwise extinct. The myths and stories can hold similar clues. A recurring legend about the people who came before, described with specific, unusual traits, might parallel the arrival of a new linguistic group. A strange, untranslatable word used only in a sacred ceremony could be a linguistic relic, a powerful fragment of a forgotten cosmology preserved because of its spiritual potency. The puzzle becomes a kind of archaeological dig through sound. By comparing these vastly different language families, scholars look for the faintest hints of ancient contact. Are there any words for fundamental things, like fire or water, that sound vaguely similar across families, suggesting a very distant, shared ancestral tongue from tens of thousands of years ago? Or is the separation so complete that it confirms these were entirely independent migrations? Each language is a worldview, a unique way of categorizing ice, snow, animals, and spirit. The fact that they all persist in Alaska suggests a long history of complex interaction, not just replacement. Some groups may have clashed, others traded and intermarried, their languages borrowing words for new technologies or concepts. The survival of this diversity, against all odds, is a testament to the resilience of cultural identity. It means that the first whispers of human story in the North were not told in one voice, but in a chorus of many, each arriving in its own time, finding a home in the vastness, and leaving a signature on the land that still echoes in the names we use today. The languages themselves are a chorus of distinct voices, yet they all share a common purpose: to give shape to the unseen. That unseen world finds its most powerful expression not in words, but in the faces carved for ceremony. Across Alaska, from the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta to the rainforests of the southeast, the creation of sacred masks represents one of humanity's most profound attempts to bridge realities. For the Yupik and Tlingit peoples, these were not theatrical props or decorative art. They were functional portals, A mask was a living interface between the community and the vast, animate forces that govern their existence. To understand them is to step into a cosmology where every animal had a conscious spirit, every natural event was a communication, and certain individuals, the shamans, could travel between these layers of reality. The masks were the physical anchors for these journeys. A Yupik mask might depict a wolf with a human face emerging from its mouth, symbolizing the shaman's spirit leaving his body in the form of his helping animal. A Tlingit mask could show a raven with articulated beak, capable of snapping open during a dance to reveal a human face beneath, dramatizing the moment of transformation when the ancestor spirit possessed the dancer. The artistry was specific and symbolic. Curved lines representing waves or air currents might frame the face, placing the spirit within its element. Pieces of shell, feathers, or swan's down were attached not as mere decoration, but as active components of the spirit's identity. These objects were believed to hold a portion of the being's essence or power. The mask maker was not just a craftsman, he was a technician of the spiritual, working under strict protocols, often in seclusion, following visions or ancestral instructions to the letter. The material itself mattered. The smell of fresh-cut wood, the texture of dried sinew for lashing, the cool smoothness of a balone shell inlay. Each choice was a deliberate step in constructing a vessel for energy. So what visions were they trying to materialize? The answers lie in the ceremonies, the great winter gatherings known as the messenger feast or the potlatch. In the flickering light of a casketch or communal men's house, a dancer wearing the mask ceased to be merely a person. Through rhythmic movement, chant, and the hypnotic presence of the carved face, he became the embodiment of the spirit. For the community watching, it was not a performance, it was an encounter. The seal spirit might speak through the dancer, offering advice for the coming hunt. The raven might recount an ancient myth, reaffirming the laws of the clan. The mask allowed a dangerous or distant power to enter the human space in a controlled, beneficial way. It made the intangible tangible. The power of the mask was believed to be real and potent. After the ceremony, many Yupik masks were deliberately destroyed or left to decay in the elements. This was not disrespect, it was a necessary release. The spirit had been invited, honored, and sent on its way. To keep the mask was to trap that power, a dangerous and selfish act. In Tlingit society, certain crest masks became heirlooms, but their care involved strict rituals, as they housed the enduring presence of an ancestor. This duality between temporary vessel and eternal heirloom highlights the central mystery. These were objects designed to hold a charge, like a spiritual battery. The act of wearing one was an act of sacred risk. What if the spirit did not leave? What if the dancer lost himself in the transformation? The very existence of the masks acknowledges that the boundary between human and other was seen as permeable, a frontier to be explored with reverence and skill. Today, these ancient masks sit in museum cases, silent and still. We can admire their symmetry and craft, but we cannot see the firelight reflecting in their shell eyes, or hear the drums that gave them life. The greatest mystery they hold is not in their construction, but in the lived experience they facilitated. They are frozen moments of communion, asking us a quiet question. In a world alive with conscious presences, what face would you need to wear to speak with them? The masks gave form to the spirits, but where did the shamans go to find them? Across Alaska, certain locations are whispered about with a particular reverence, not just as beautiful places, but as portals. These are the sites often described in oral histories as the dwelling places of powerful spirits, places where a shaman could go to seek visions, diagnose illness, or divine the location of game. There are the Arctic's ancient oracle sites, and their power was believed to be as real as the rock and ice themselves. We hear of specific mountain passes where the wind sings with voices, of isolated hot springs steaming in the frozen wilderness, of lonely hilltops that catch the first and last light. These were not randomly chosen. The selection of these sacred spaces points to a sophisticated understanding of the landscape, one that may intertwine spiritual belief with tangible and potentially mind-altering natural phenomena. Consider a shaman preparing for a vision quest. He might journey for days to a remote cave noted by his ancestors. Inside, the air is thick with minerals from a geothermal vent, a faint, sulfurous mist hanging in the stillness. He fasts, chants, and drums in the darkness for hours, his senses heightened by exhaustion and the rhythmic sound. In this state, even subtle environmental factors could profoundly warp perception. Geothermal areas often release gases like carbon dioxide or radon, which in confined spaces can cause lightheadedness, disorientation, and even hallucinations. The flickering light from a single oil lamp on moist, glittering cave walls could create moving shadows that the brain, starved of food and saturated with rhythm, interprets as dancing figures or animal spirits. The shaman's journey, then, might be a carefully orchestrated interaction between human intention and a landscape that physically facilitates a trance state. Other sites might interact with the senses in different ways. Some mountain passes are notorious for strange acoustics, where the wind funneling through a narrow gap creates low, harmonic drones or eerie whistles. To a culture that believed the world was alive with consciousness, these were not random sounds. They were the literal voices of the place, messages to be interpreted. There are also accounts of locations with unusual magnetic fields, perhaps due to deposits of lodestone or unique geology. While the effects on the human brain are subtle, navigating such a place with an internal compass attuned to the Earth's pull could produce a profound feeling of disorientation or otherworldliness, a sensation easily interpreted as entering a spirit realm. Even the simple act of sitting in a hot spring, the body's core temperature rising while the Arctic air chills the face, creates a powerful sensory contradiction that can blur the lines between the physical and the ethereal. The true mystery of these oracle sites lies in this intersection. Did ancient peoples intuitively identify locations with unusual properties and then sanctify them, attributing the strange feelings they evoked to spiritual presence? Or did their deep spiritual beliefs lead them to interpret any powerful natural place as sacred, regardless of its physical oddities? The answer is likely both, a feedback loop between landscape and belief. A hot spring is a miracle of warmth in a frozen world, a literal gift from the underworld. It is naturally sacred. If that spring also emitted a faint, intoxicating vapor, it would only confirm its potency as a gateway. The shamanic tradition provided the framework, the ritual, and the cultural permission to explore these altered states. The landscape provided the catalyst. This reframes the entire concept of an oracle site. It moves beyond the idea of a passive location where prayers were offered. Instead, it suggests these were active interfaces, ancient laboratories of consciousness where human beings learned to use the very properties of the earth to journey inward. The shaman was not just a spiritual figure. He was an explorer of inner space, and his map was written in geothermal vents, magnetic stones, and echoing winds. The visions he brought back were not mere fantasies. They were data gathered from the frontier where mind and matter meet. So when we hear a legend of a mountain where the spirits speak, we should listen with more than just curiosity. We should wonder if the mountain itself is speaking, in a language of gas and stone and frequency, a language that the shamans, for a time, learned how to understand. But the journeys of shamans were not the only passages across this ancient land. While spiritual travelers navigated inner landscapes, a different kind of network pulsed across the physical terrain, a silent commerce of incredible scale. Long before the first Russian fur trader set foot on Alaskan shores, the continent's interior was woven together by a complex web of trade routes. This was not a single, marked road, but a capillary system of knowledge, passed hand to hand across generations. The evidence is not in grand marketplaces, but in the quiet movement of raw materials over staggering distances. Archaeologists have found tools made from obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for its razor-sharp edge, hundreds of miles from the nearest known source. A spear point discovered on the Arctic coast might be traced chemically to a specific volcano in the Yukon, a journey of over 1,000 miles. Similarly, copper from the Wrangell Mountains has been found in sites along the Bering Sea, and jade from the Kabuk River appears in artifacts far to the south. These are not isolated curiosities. They are the physical signatures of a continent talking to itself. The mystery deepens when we try to reconstruct the human machinery behind this trade. Who were the middlemen? It is unlikely that a single hunter traveled from the jade beds to the Arctic Ocean. Instead, trade likely operated in a series of short, overlapping hops. A Gwich'in family in the Yukon Flats might acquire obsidian from their northern neighbors, who got it from a group living nearer the mountains. They would trade it southward for dried salmon or finely tanned hides. Over a few years, that single piece of obsidian could travel from the interior to the coast, changing hands a dozen times. This system required more than just desire for exotic goods. It demanded a shared language of value, a protocol for safe passage, and a deep, mutual understanding between different cultures. There must have been annual gatherings at traditional sites, perhaps at river confluences or mountain passes when caribou herds migrated, where news, stories, and goods were exchanged in a vibrant, temporary fair. The real commodity being traded was often information, the location of game, warnings of rival groups, or news of a volcanic eruption that created a new deposit of glassy stone. This implies a level of economic sophistication we rarely attribute to ancient hunter-gatherer societies. It was a system built on trust and reputation, not currency. A man's word and the quality of his goods were his credit. The maintenance of these routes was a form of living geography, a mental map not of political borders, but of social relationships and resource locations. Elders would teach the younger generation not just how to hunt, but who to trade with, which passes were safe in which season, and what gifts were appropriate to ensure a welcome. The routes themselves were likely fluid, shifting with climate, animal migrations, and intergroup relations. A conflict between two tribes could close a corridor for a generation, forcing the network to find a new path, like water flowing around a stone. The most profound implication of this vanished network is the picture it paints of ancient Alaska. This was not a collection of isolated, struggling bands. It was a connected world. A man on the Tanana River might wear a pendant of sea otter teeth that began its journey on the Pacific coast. A woman on the Kuskokwim might use a scraper made from copper that sang of distant, inland mountains. Their daily lives were touched by places they would never see, carried to them by the hands of strangers. This connectivity challenges the stereotype of a lonely, subsistence existence. It suggests communities that were outward-looking, curious, and economically savvy. The true lost treasure is not the obsidian or the copper, but the intricate web of human connection that moved them. That web, woven from memory and mutual need, was the true infrastructure of the ancient North, and its silent pathways may still lie just beneath the moss, waiting to be remembered. The intricate trade routes that stitched ancient Alaska together were not immune to the greatest force of all, a changing sky. Between the years 800 and 1200, the Arctic experienced a profound climatic shift known as the medieval warm period. This was not a gentle warming, but a cataclysm that reshaped the very foundations of life. For the peoples of Alaska, this era was a crucible, a time of both terrifying loss and unprecedented opportunity, and its echoes may still reverberate in the oldest stories told today. Imagine the slow, relentless creep of the sea. As global temperatures rose, glaciers melted, and ocean waters expanded, swallowing coastlines that had been stable for millennia. For villages built at the water's edge, this was not a theory. It was a daily, visible terror. The beach where children played one summer would be underwater the next. Fishing platforms were consumed by the waves. Eventually, whole settlements had to be abandoned, their sod houses left to collapse as the people retreated inland to higher ground. This was a forced migration, a trauma written not in history books, but in the silent, drowned middens now lying beneath the Bering Sea. But the changes were not just coastal. In the interior, the warming altered the very fabric of the ecosystem. The vast, dry grasslands of the Mammoth Steppe had already given way to wetter tundra, but now the process accelerated. Caribou herds, following ancient paths etched into the land for thousands of years, found their routes blocked by new forests or altered by shifting lakes and rivers. A hunting band that relied on a predictable migration could find their larder empty, their survival suddenly in question. Some cultures faced agonizing decline in this new world. The Dorset people, so exquisitely adapted to a world of stable sea ice, likely found their sealing grounds vanishing as the ice grew thin and unpredictable. Their intimate, small-scale way of life, a masterpiece of Arctic specialization, may have become a liability. In contrast, other cultures seized the moment. The Thule ancestors, with their advanced umiaks and whaling technology, found a door opening. Warmer waters and longer ice-free seasons could have spurred a population boom in bowhead whales. For a people whose spiritual and physical world revolved around the great whale, this was a siren call. The warming climate may have provided the fuel for their breathtaking expansion eastward, turning them from a regional culture into an Arctic superpower within a few centuries. This period of dramatic upheaval poses a haunting question: how much of this real, historical cataclysm is preserved not in soil layers or carbon dates, but in the living memory of stories? Indigenous oral histories across Alaska are rich with accounts that feel like direct reflections of this time. There are widespread flood myths, tales of villages being swallowed by the sea, of people fleeing in boats to mountaintops that became islands. The story of a great deluge is not unique to one culture. It is a near universal human narrative, but in Alaska, it carries the chilling weight of geographical truth. Then there are the migration sagas, detailed stories of long journeys from an original homeland to a new country. These are not vague legends. They often name specific landmarks, describe the challenges faced, and explain why the move was necessary. Could these be the distilled, poetic records of entire communities relocating over generations in response to a changing climate? The stories might speak of a time when the sun was hotter for longer, when the game behaved strangely, or when the ice refused to form. A myth about a trickster spirit stealing the cold or a hero who had to bargain with the sea for new land could be a way to explain and give meaning to events that were otherwise chaotic and terrifying. The line between metaphor and memory blurs when a Tlingit story describes raven pulling up islands from a primordial sea. Is it a creation myth, or could it be a memory of the post-glacial world emerging, of new lands becoming habitable as the waters receded in some places and rose in others? The mystery lies in the encoding. These stories were not meant to be scientific records. They were meant to teach, to warn, and to affirm identity. The historical truth is filtered through generations of telling, shaped by spiritual beliefs and narrative beauty. Yet the core events, the trauma of displacement, the triumph of finding a new home, the awe at a world transforming, these emotional truths align perfectly with what we know of the medieval warm period. So we are left with a powerful possibility. the deepest layers of Alaskan oral tradition may not be mere folklore, but a sophisticated form of historical preservation. They are the human heart's response to ecological catastrophe, a way to ensure that the children of the future remember that the world can change, that the coastlines are not permanent, and that survival depends on adaptation, memory, and the courage to journey into the unknown. The great warming of 1,000 years ago may have ended, but its story is still being told, around fires and in ceremonies, a legend that is also a warning and a testament to resilience. The stories of warming seas and shifting caribou trails remind us that history is not a fixed record, but a landscape still being revealed. After exploring 24 distinct enigmas, from lost cities to sunken forests, a single, overwhelming question rises from the permafrost like a final, silent giant. If these are the fragments we have found, what still lies buried? Consider the sheer, staggering scale of Alaska. It is a land of 660,000 square miles, a wilderness where mountain ranges the size of entire countries remain virtually unexplored by archaeologists. Vast stretches of tundra, dense rainforest, and remote coastline have never felt the touch of a surveyor's trowel. The harsh climate itself is both a preserver and a concealer, locking secrets in ice while making them nearly impossible to reach. Conservative estimates suggest that perhaps 95% of Alaska's archaeological record remains undiscovered, untouched, and waiting. This means every mystery we have discussed is likely just a single page from a library of millions. So what could still be out there, hidden in a silent valley or beneath the moss? Let us speculate, not with fantasy, but with the logic of what we have already found. We know the permafrost can preserve organic material for tens of thousands of years. What if an entire seasonal settlement lies frozen in time, not just a single tool cache? Imagine stumbling upon a ring of tents, their caribou skin covers still intact, with tools left beside cold hearths, and the remains of a meal scattered as if the inhabitants just stepped away. Such a sight would be an unprecedented snapshot, a complete chapter of daily life from 10,000 years ago. We have seen petroglyphs and small carvings, but what about a true archive? Could there be a sheltered cave, its walls covered not in individual symbols, but in a continuous narrative of marks, a chronicle of generations painted in ochre or etched into stone? Or perhaps a cache of wooden tablets, inscribed with a proto-writing system we have not yet recognized, telling of migrations, battles, or encounters with animals now extinct. The most tantalizing possibility is evidence of a truly unknown civilization, one that does not fit any existing cultural category. The architectural hints of the so-called pyramids, the strange regularity of some coastal stone formations, the legends of the Pal Ryuke, all these threads point to the potential for a cultural signature we have not yet defined. What if a dig in the Wright River Delta uncovered the foundations of a settlement with a layout unlike any Ipiutak or Thule site, featuring artifacts of a style completely foreign to the archaeological record? Such a discovery would force us to redraw the entire map of human history in the North. It could represent a lost migration wave, a sophisticated culture that retreated before others arrived, or a unique branch of human innovation that flourished in isolation and then vanished without passing its knowledge forward. The ultimate mystery, then, is not any one of these specific puzzles. It is the profound scale of our own ignorance. For every blue babe pulled from the muck, 1,000 others may still be buried. For every on-your-knees cave, 10,000 others may wait with their passages sealed. The land is so vast, and the signs so subtle, a slight discoloration in the soil, a scatter of stones that seems too ordered, a mound that catches the light at a certain angle. The greatest find may not be a glittering treasure, but a humble piece of worked wood or a patterned bit of cord, that unlocks a connection we never dreamed possible. Alaska's past is not a closed book. It is an epic still being written by the wind, the ice, and the slow, patient work of the soil. The final question it asks us is a humbling one. How much of the human story remains out there, silent and unseen, in the immense and waiting quiet of the North? These threads of vanished cities, ivory faces, and silent stone circles are not separate puzzles. They are pieces of a single, immense mosaic, a portrait of human history in the far North that is far deeper and more intricate than any single story can contain. We began with whispers of stone walls in the Brooks Range and ended contemplating the very ground melting beneath our feet, each mystery a doorway into a different layer of time. The Ipiutak carvers, the Thule explorers, the Dorset artists, the first wanderers in On Your Knees cave, they were not primitive survivors, but sophisticated societies who solved the Arctic on their own terms, leaving behind signatures we are only now learning to read. Their stories remind us that this land was never an empty wilderness, but a lived-in world, a theater of innovation, spirituality, and connection that thrived for thousands of years before written records began. The true lesson of Alaska's unsolved mysteries is not that we have all the answers, but that we have barely begun to ask the right questions. Every melting patch of permafrost, every storm-scoured beach, every remote valley holds the potential for the next revelation, the artifact or site that could connect these fragments into a new and startling picture. So we turn the question to you. Of all the enigmas we have explored, which one lingers in your mind? Is it the haunting spiral eyes of the Ipiutak masks, the silent geometry of a possible pyramid, or the profound silence of the Dorset people's disappearance? Share your thoughts and keep that sense of wonder alive, for in Alaska, the past is not dead and buried. It is merely frozen, waiting for the right moment and the right curious eye to thaw its next great secret.